In today's lesson, we're going to be solving problems by finding equivalent ratios, and our goal is to use tape diagrams to help us solve different types of problems. In today's lesson, we're going to look at two types of problems. The first is going to use the procedure for when we know the ratio and a total number of things in the ratio. We'll take a look at this and then we'll look at the second type in just a couple minutes. So our first step is to draw a tape diagram to represent the given ratio. So let's read our problem to see if we can find out what ratio we're told. So it says a county superintendent of highways is interested in the number of different types of vehicles that regularly travel within his country in his county. In the month of August, a total of 192 registrations were purchased for passenger cars and pickup trucks at the local Department of Motor Vehicles, or the DMV. The DMV reported that in the month of August, for every 5 passenger cars registered, there were 7 pickup trucks registered. So we want to find out how many of each type of vehicle were registered in the county in the month of August. So it was near the end that I recognized a ratio given to me. It told me for every 5 passenger cars registered, there were 7 pickup trucks. So my ratio would be 5 to 7. So my first step is going to be to draw a tape diagram to show this ratio. So I've completed my tape diagram. Notice my passenger cars, it said there was 5 of them. So I created 5 boxes of equal size. It told me there were 7 pickup trucks. So in my pickup truck length, I have 7 of the same boxes. Step 2 then asked me to count how many units there are in the entire tape diagram. Well, if I have 5 passenger car boxes and 7 units representing pickup trucks, that means I have a total of 12 units for my entire diagram. So my ratio was 5 to 7. I had 12 units. Now I need to divide the total by the number of units I have. So I have to identify what is that total that I'm given in my problem. Well, if I go back to the word problem itself, it told me that in the month of August, a total of 192 registrations were purchased. So the total is going to be 192, and I'm going to be dividing that total by the 12 units that I have, because all of these units together, whatever I multiply them by to find my equivalent ratio should give me 192. Basically what I'm doing, I have the ratio 5 to 7 right now. An equivalent ratio would be 10 to 14, and that would give me 24 vehicles total. Another equivalent ratio would be 15 to 21. That would give me 36. So notice I could keep creating a table of equivalent ratios like I've done on previous days, but to get all the way up to a total of 192 down here, that's going to take me a lot of time. So instead, I'm going to use the information I know, and I'm going to do 192 divided by 12. What that tells me is that for those 192 people, if I divide it by 12, 12 is going to go in one time. It's going to give me 12 and going to give me 72. Well, I know that 12 times 6 is going to give me 72. So 192 divided by 12 is going to be 16. What that tells me is that each of these values should be 16. If I make each of these blocks 16, since there's 5 of them, I would do 5 times 16. My ratio is going to be 80 here. So if I multiply my quotient, which was 16, times the number of parts in the ratio, I can find my answer. So 5 times 16 is 80. Well, each of these would also represent 16 as well, which is really what I'm doing when I'm finding an equivalent ratio. So if I do 7 times 16, I'm going to get 70 plus 42. I'm going to get 112. Notice if I add 112 and 80, I'm going to get 192. So this helped me complete my table of equivalent ratios without actually having to keep listing and listing and listing all those equivalent ratios. So now I want to go back to my question. It asks, how many of each type of vehicle were registered? Well, I had 20, I'm just going to abbreviate because I'm running out of room here, passenger cars, and I have 112 pickup trucks, and that will equal my total of 192 registrations for the month of August. So my final answer would be 80 pickup or passenger cars and 112 pickup trucks. The second type of problem I'm going to encounter is when I'm given a ratio and I'm given also a difference between each part of the ratio, not a total this time. Again, though, I'm going to start by drawing a tape diagram to represent the ratio that I'm given. Here it says the superintendent of highways is further interested in the number of commercial vehicles that frequently use the county's highways. He obtained information from the Department of Motor Vehicles for the month of September and found that for each 14 non-commercial vehicles, there were 5 commercial vehicles. It tells me that there were 108 more non-commercial vehicles than commercial vehicles. We want to know how many of each type of vehicle frequently uses the county's highways during the month of September. So I've indicated 2 important pieces of information that I've noticed while I was reading. The first is that the ratio I have is 14 non-commercial to 5 commercial. So that's the ratio I'm taking a look at. The other thing, again, notice last time I was given a total. Here it told me there were 108 more. So 108 isn't a total. 108 is comparing the difference between the 2 types of vehicles. The non-commercial has more than the commercial vehicles. So I've created a tape diagram to represent the given ratio of 14 to 5 that I found. Notice I have 14 boxes for non-commercial vehicles and 5 boxes for commercial vehicles. What I want to do then is subtract the number of units in each part of the ratio. So notice my 2 parts of the ratio are 14 and 5. So if I subtract those 2 parts, I get an answer of 9. Then it tells me to divide the total difference. So what that 9 represents, before I go on, is all of these blocks here. That's why I did subtraction. I could count those blocks and get 9, but subtraction's a little bit faster. So I have 9 blocks more in the non-commercial vehicles than I do in the commercial vehicles. So then, what I also know about this 9 blocks is that I'm told that there were 108 more non-commercial. So this entire row of units should equal 108 vehicles. Well, since there's 9 blocks and in a ratio each block or unit is equal, my third step tells me to divide the total difference given in the problem, which is the 108, by my answer from 2. So if I divide 108 divided by 9, I'm going to get 12. So 12 is going to be the worth of each of these boxes. I'm not going to write them all in, but each one of those should be 12 to give me my total. Then I can multiply each of the numbers in my ratio. Remember, my ratio is 14 to 5. And again, like before, I don't want to have to list out every single possible equivalent ratio and then try to find the one that gives me 108 as the difference between those. Here I use these steps to help me do that. So if I do 5 times 12, I'm going to get 60. And 60 represents the number of commercial vehicles. If I do 14 times 12, well, then I'm going to take a little bit of space to complete. I'll get 8, 2, 0, 4, 1, 168 non-commercial vehicles. And notice, to check my answer, I should find that the difference between those is 108 because it told me that there were 108 more non-commercial vehicles. Well, if I subtract those, I get 8, 6 and 6 is 0, and then I have the 1. So I did find a difference of 108. So let me go back. The question asks how many of each type of vehicle frequently uses the county's highways during the month of September. So my answer would be 168 non-commercial vehicles and 60 commercial vehicles. If you feel like you've understood the steps so far, I suggest you pausing the video, giving number 3 a try on your own, and then restarting the video to see how your answer matches to mine. Here it tells us that the ratio of the number of people who own a smartphone to the number of people who own a flip phone is 4 to 3. I'm going to pause there. Both types of procedures I have tell me to start out by creating a tape diagram, so I'm going to do that first. Now that I've created a tape diagram, the second piece of information it tells me is that if there are 500 more people own a smartphone than a flip phone, how many people own each type of phone? Well, notice this is the one where it tells me more. So I don't have a total here. I know that these difference between them, 4 minus 3, is only 1. This time I really didn't have to do the subtraction. I could just count. So this one block represents the difference between those. This one block also represents 500 people. Well, here, since it's one block already, I don't have to do any division to figure it out. I know that each of these blocks represent 500 people. Well, that tells me that 4 and 3, to find my equivalent ratio, I'm going to multiply each of these by 500. And I'm going to get 2,000 people with a smartphone. And I'm going to get 1,500 people with a flip phone. Again, this shows me why I wouldn't want to create a whole list of equivalent ratios, because by the time I got to 2,000 and 1,500, I would have written a whole bunch of these. But by using the tape diagrams, I was able to identify that this represents the description shown. Notice it says if 500 more people own a smartphone, so I can check my work. I know that 500 or 2,000 minus 1,500 does equal 500, which is what I wanted from the information up here. So to answer the question, it asked me how many people own each type of phone. Well, my answer would be that 2,000 people own a smartphone and that 1,500 people own a flip phone. This is the last example we're going to do together. Again, I suggest if you've kind of gotten the hang of this, give it a try on your own, pause the video, and start back up to see how your answer matches mine. Here it tells us that Sammy and David were selling water bottles to raise money for new football uniforms. Sammy sold 5 water bottles for every 3 water bottles David sold. Again, I'm going to stop right away here and create my tape diagram before I move on. Now that I have my tape diagram created, I'm going to look at what other information they provide me with. It also says that together they sold 160 water bottles. So this is an example of a total that I have. So I'm going to follow those set of steps here. Therefore, I'm going to start with counting the total number of units in my tape diagram. Well, I have 5 plus 3, which will be 8 total blocks or pieces of tape in my tape diagram. Then I'm going to divide my total, which was 160, by those 8 groups to tell me how many units should be in each group. Well, this is a mental math problem. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Add my 0, so each of those is worth 20. So what I'm going to do with my ratio is I'm going to multiply each piece by 20. That's going to tell me that Sammy sold 100. So 100 are sold by Sam, and 60 are sold by David. Notice that still maintains the ratio that was described, 5 to 3. And if I add that total, 100 plus 60 is 160. So that satisfies the other part of my problem. It says I asked how many did each boy sell, so my final answer is that 100 were sold by Sam and 60 were sold by David. At this point, go ahead and work on the last 2 problems on your note skeleton sheet. Please pause at the stop signs and indicate your number between 0 and 4 with how comfortable you felt solving these problems on your own. Make sure you fill in the questions, comments, and concerns part, either describing that you felt really good about them or indicating any questions or comments you might have, and we will go over these in class tomorrow.